Good afternoon, friends. Over here on our Patreon channel, Israeli News Live, and God bless you for joining. Quite a few of you joined in today, and I really appreciate that. This message here that I'm going to share with you is something that I know I can share it here on Patreon because from things that I've been told, there are certain things you can disclose and certain platforms you can disclose it on and get away with it and the government not freak out about it. Patreon happens to be one of those channels you can do that on. Now, not when it comes to the V. If you get into the V issue, even Patreon will censor you and shut you down. But things like what I'm going to share with you now, the moon and its orbit and what's going to happen, is actually considered a classified subject and part of national security. Believe it or not, that's how serious they take that. So, I disclosed some of this information already in a video that we did here about relocating. If you live anywhere 200 miles within a shoreline of a major body of water, such as the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, any ocean in the world for that matter, you need to seriously consider start relocation process now. That was the word I got directly from friends in Washington. And I really wondered why. I knew it had to do with the moon. I did know that. I was told that, but I was never giving any details. And of course, they could not give details when you're dealing with classified information unless your clearance is for classified information of that magnitude, and that all depends on the level of classification you have. You're not just necessarily able to find out about it, and especially if you're no longer in the system, and you're just not. There's just some things they can't share. But you can kind of figure it out. If you get the right information, you can kind of go in the right direction to know what's going on. And so that's what I was able to glean. I was able to glean and get us into the right direction about this. I know that we're dealing with a binary system coming in. And anytime you say binary system is with a star of some sort. So most people would think planet X, whatever the case may be. We've got asteroid belts that we're going to be traveling through, and that's going to begin more in earnest come September, October this year. We're going to start to see a bunch of small stones again coming in. A lot of them creating the sonic booms, things like that, just enough to kind of make you a little bit uneasy. But still, it's not the really bad stuff. And other than the fact that unless we can change the orbit of one particular asteroid, it's going to cause cataclysmic event for the west coast of the United States. But that has nothing to do with this change of ocean levels that I was told that's going to take place and is already beginning to take place and will climax in 2029. So by 2029, I was told there won't be any coastal cities any longer. Well, that really caught my attention, and I wanted to know why. Why would there not be coastal cities? I mean, and I'm told this is going to be on a global scale. So, what was said to me is, if you know anyone and you want to get that information out there, they need to seriously consider now getting moved. Well, that let me know that this is something that's going to gradually take place over the next 8 years. We're in 2021, fixing to go into 2022. So for the next 8 years, something's going to happen that's going to cause global cities to disappear from the face of the earth. And we're talking 200 miles inland. And if that's global, it can't necessarily be earthquakes either. I mean, you could have an earthquake on the west coast of California and lose maybe 50 miles of land or whatever the case may be, might fall off into the ocean, but that's not a global event. So the only thing I could figure is the moon itself is what controls the tides on the earth. I know this. I was taught to navigate ships. I knew this from an early age, that's what literally the water is heaped up on our earth at its axis. And I have been in some briefings where it's been shared with me about the spin of our own earth, how that the spinning of our Earth keeps the waters heaped up on the outer edge. But the shifting of our Earth, or the change of the axis of our Earth, or any change in rotation, would also allow the water to begin to drop back down. And of course, then coastal floodings would be astronomical. And so I've been kind of pulling and pushing to try to find out. And of course, the good thing is for you guys is that it gives you the opportunity to say, okay, wow, we live, Florida, Texas, California, Washington, South Carolina, Georgia, whatever the case may be. We have coastal cities everywhere in the United States, and many of you live around the world too. You might be in Australia, things like that. You need to consider, what could I do? Where could I get a job? If you're working for a company, let's say you work for Walmart, right? And you want to transfer to another Walmart, find a Walmart inland, transfer, move your family. And I know that's not as easy as said as done, but, the question was there any validity to this? Well, I got this information here from, I won't say from who, but it was sent to me to kind of spearhead my ability to know what's going on. And this congressman here spoke about exactly, I think his name was, not Gilbert, but let me just play the clip for you. He spoke about the changing of the orbit. And it actually went viral on the internet, but he spoke about the changing of the moon's orbit and the Earth's orbit around the sun. I want you to listen to this little clip here, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about it.
Been testified to the Forest Service and the BLM. You want very much to work on the issue of climate change. I was informed by the immediate past director of NASA that they have found that the moon's orbit is changing slightly, and so is the Earth's orbit around the sun. We know there's been significant solar flare activity. And so is there anything that the National Forest Service or BLM can do to change the course of the moon's orbit or the Earth's orbit around the sun? Obviously, that would have profound effects on our climate.
I would have to follow up with you on that one, Mr. Gomert.
Yeah, Congressman
Well, if
Gomert.
you figure out a way that you in the Forest Service can make that change, I'd like to know.
Now, a lot of people made fun of him for that. They didn't know if he was serious or what. But the thing is, it was my suspicion all along that the moon's orbit is going to change. Now, granted, there is science that backs that up. They say that the moon is changing in its orbit. And of course, this is the Science Times is discussing his actual statement. Is it even possible? And of course, the answer for them is yes, it is possible to change the orbit of the moon. And but in fact, right here it says NASA said that these changes in the orbit and axis could affect the climate in both the short term and long term, but noted that it would only have little effect on the seasons experienced on the planet. Additionally, astronomers reported observing the moon has been slowly moving away from the Earth for an inch every year. Well, undoubtedly, something's going to cause the moon to move a lot more rapidly than an inch every year, especially from the intel I've been getting that by 2029, coastal cities are going to be disappearing. So then I ran across this particular article from CBS News that came out in July of 2021. Moon wobble in orbit may lead to record flooding on the Earth. Wait till you see what's written in the article. Every coast in the U.S. is facing rapid increasing high tide floods, NASA says. This is due to wobble in the moon's orbit, working in tandem with climate change fueled risk sea levels. Rising sea levels. The new study from NASA and the University of Hawaii, published recently in the Journal of Nature Climate Change, warns that upcoming changes in the moon's orbit could lead to a record flooding on the Earth in the next decade. Well, it's told 8 years. Through mapping the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration NOAA sea level rise scenarios, flooding thresholds, and astronomical cycles, researchers found flooding in American coastal cities could be several multiple worse in 2030s when the next moon wobble is expected to begin. They expect the flooding to significantly damage infrastructure and displace communities. While the study highlights the dire situation facing coastal cities, the lunar wobble is actually natural occurrence, first reported in 1728. The moon's orbit is responsible for periods of both higher and lower tides about every 18.6 years, and they aren't dangerous in their own right. In half of the moon's 18.6-year cycle, the Earth's regular daily tides are suppressed. High tides are lower than normal, and the low tides are higher than normal. NASA explains in the other half of the cycle, tides are amplified. High tides get higher and low tides get lower. Global sea level rise pushes high tides in only one direction. A higher, so half of the 18.6-year lunar cycle, counteracts the effects of sea level rise on high tides, and other half increases the effect. But this time around, scientists are more concerned with the sea level rise. Due to climate change, the next high tide floods are expected to be more intense, more frequent than ever before, exacerbating already grim predictions. And NOAA reported that 600 such floods in 2019. Scientists are expecting 3 to 4 times that amount in the mid-2030s after the sea level rise has another decade to process. But what I'm being told is that within 8 years, you're going to see it happen. And the reason being is because the wobbling of the moon and its orbit and the changing of its orbit is going to drastically increase because of the binary system we're going through. So what will cause that? I don't know. But I am hearing some very, very grim things about it. So nonetheless, if it's feasible and possible, you pray about it, see how God leads you, and you're able to relocate, then I would consider that. I'm Steve Ben-Nun with Israeli News Live. Thank you for listening.